When you've been racing KTMs as long as I have, you get a lot of questions, right? Which is wonderful. I love helping people. And one of the questions that I get pretty often, especially the last few years, is what tune do you run? Who flashed your ECU and how's it going for you? And my answer for years now has been the same. Nobody touches my ECU. Nobody. I run the Akra map that came with the KTM when I bought the bike, and that's it.
It's a policy. You just
That's the lead, all right.
I've had my chain yanked by so many engine builders. 3 laps, and I have a bucket of parts on my hands. So don't mind me. I don't trust anybody anymore. Leave me alone. But for the last 2.5 years, this guy Shiv from the Bay Area of California has been offering to flash my ECU and run a better tune and have more horsepower. And I always say, no, hell no. Stay away from me. Go run your dyno with somebody else's bike. But recently he promised me I can give you 2 flashes. Mine, and you can have your original, and you can switch back and forth. Then finally I said, all right, I'll try that. That's cool. I don't have to commit to a bucket of broken parts. I can switch back to what I have already. Great, I'll do it. And I did it. And guess what? The results, what I experienced, are gonna shock you. There's 3 major things. You wanna get into them? Let's get into them. I'm Gogo for Superduke.com. Let's do this. First thing I'm going to tell you is this is no advertisement for anybody's flash tuning service. I don't like these flash tuning things. I don't like the guys online who post their horsepower curve is more than that thing. Bullshit. I'll tell you something that's going to shock you right now. The race that I did 2 weeks ago with Open Flash Performance's special tune, which was tuned specifically on VP race fuel. I think it's called T4 or something like that. It's not the craziest, most expensive fuel. It's oxygenated. It does give more horsepower. They say 2.5% more power just by pouring the fuel in. So not only did we pour the race fuel in, but Shiv tuned with the race fuel. So I have data acquisition on my bike, which is really valuable in this conversation because not only can I tell you what my forks are doing at certain parts of the track and what speed I'm going, but I can tell you exactly what gear I am, exactly where, on what lap, and I can show how much the bike accelerated sooner this month than it did last month. So the things that I'm going to share with you today are all facts. Here's a fact for you. With race gas and a special tune designed especially for that race gas at the same racetrack in relatively the same weather, same rider, same track. You want to know what the difference is in the top speed of the front straightaway at Thunderhill Raceway? 0. There's 0 difference. 149 miles an hour with Shiv's tune and the race gas, 149 miles an hour with pump gas and the Akra tune. Exactly the same, right? So there's your proof. I'm not going to bullshit you here. Okay, so what is the difference? There are 3 major differences that I loved. I mean, it was an education. It was really an education. Like I said, I'll admit it. I have a bad attitude about these dyno people and flash tune stuff. Go jump in the lake, all of you. But I also have a little bit of a problem, a little bias. I'm a little suspect of these people, and I probably shouldn't be, right? I'm not a perfect person. Maybe I'm a little prejudiced against all these online charts because I did learn some things at the last race that it was an education. I didn't know these things before. I wasn't aware of it. So I'm not saying to take it all back, but I'm a little more open-minded now because there was some positive changes that I got with Shiv's tune. One of which, and this is pretty brilliant, is when you ride a bike. I have a funny way of thinking about this or describing. Let's say you're in a turn and you want to start driving out, right? And if you had 100% traction, let's see if we can synchronize this, right? If you had 100% traction and as you rolled the throttle, the bike accelerated, right? You're exactly in sync with as you roll, there's your traction and there you go, right? But let's say you had a really slow bike, like your motor is just dog slow, not what it used to be when you got it. So when you accelerate with that bike, it's your throttle hand will accelerate like this and the bike's still here. And then slowly the bike catches up, right? Because it's just, the motor is just so lagging. It's so slow. So if you think about that, that's dangerous, by the way, in racing. When you have a bike that's not tuned very well, or you have to get way ahead of your traction, you're really like walking a tightrope, right? Because when you get way ahead of where the traction is, when you finally do break traction and the back tire starts to spin, your throttle is at 100 miles an hour and your traction, 100% traction, was like 50 miles an hour, okay? Now it starts to spin and the tire now is at like 60 miles an hour before you start to feel it. So now you start to feel it and your throttle is still 40 miles per hour ahead of where the tire is. So you start to roll off because you start to feel this thing going sideways a little bit, right? So now you're at 90 and guess what? Now it's at 70. So now you're at 80 and it's at 75. So all of this time that you spent rolling off, it's still been spinning faster and faster because you were still ahead of where it was until finally they're synced, right? But when they finally get synced again, you're spinning at 80 miles an hour and you're only going 50 miles an hour. So you've got this high side, this crazy high side that you have to recover from. And let's hope you recover from it, right? This is a hard bike to control. A bike that you get way ahead of with the throttle and then the rear tire starts to spin and then you're trying to get resynced again. That's when you see the rear comes out and it comes back and then they're doing this and they're just all over the road. This is the first major difference that I experienced with Shiv's tune. And I'll grant you, it was with race gas, right? So there's going to be a difference there. And Shiv actually, like we fought about this. I was pissed because I knew I was going to be asked questions. I knew people were going to say, like, well, what's the difference? Like, you had pump gas, and then you have Shiv's tune. What's the difference? Well, I asked Shiv to give me a tune with pump gas. So it would be apples to apples. Of course he didn't do it. Because, you know what I mean? But he did tell me later why he wouldn't do that. And I guess I respect it, but just give me apples to apples. So there is a little bit of a difference, right, in how the bike worked just because of the fuel being better. But I have raced this bike with the same fuel in the past. I don't always do it. Sometimes when I'm scared, when I think someone's going to kick my ass, I'll put race gas in, right? But when I'm a little more confident, I'll just put pump gas in. So I know the difference. I know how the bike runs. So you're going to have to take my word for it. I can't give you data on this because I didn't write down what races I use gas and what races I use like race fuel. But I can tell you, honestly, it is better with Shiv's tune. And what's better is the crispness. So when I give it the throttle, I'm only a tiny bit ahead of the wheel spin, which is brilliant because as I'm accelerating, like lean the bike in and I square the turn off and now I'm starting to drive out. And as I'm rolling the throttle, like already it's going out. And I could back off a little bit and it comes back. And I'm just steering with the rear tire. Literally, like you're steering your way through the turn, but also like the control of the throttle. Let's say you're not in MotoGP, right? I'm not in MotoGP. World Superbike, nothing. The races that I'm in, nobody cares about, right? I care about them, but so what's the difference really? Like, who cares? Did I win or I came in 5th place? Nobody really cares. What does matter is the joy, right? It's motorcycling. I say this all the time. Like, I packed my motorcycle in my van and I drove all these hours and I stayed in a hotel and all this stuff. Why? Really, when it comes down to it, to experience the joy of riding a motorcycle. In my case, racing a motorcycle. But still, motorcycle, joy. So, what is the difference with Shift 2 as far as acceleration? So much more fun. It's so much more like exciting. It's safer, right? And more control, easier to do the same thing, right? Everybody wants to spin the rear tire and, leave a nice black mark, and people come into the pits later and they're like, holy cow, dude. Like, it's great. It's great. It's exciting. It's what motorcycles all about. And it was easier to do that. It was better, it was safer, and it was faster. So that's one. Now for number 2, here is one that I can prove to you with my data acquisition. A lot of times I have to explain what I feel to people, and I have a very sensitive ass. It sounds terrible, but it's true. I'm very sensitive on the bike. I think that's one of the reasons why I can go faster than the average person, because I'm very sensitive to stuff. And one of the things I'm super sensitive to with this bike with so much torque behind me, the 1290 Superduke, is when you're accelerating, like especially when I'm leaned over. There are a few turns. There's one at Laguna Seca, turn 4. There's one at Thunder Hill, and specifically when you come out of like this 11, 12, 13 S turn thing, you sweep onto this back straightaway, and it's kind of a sweeping turn. You are leaned over, but finally when you gain the trust, you're full throttle or close to it. And you're still leaned over, and you're coming out of this sweeping turn, and you're driving up this back straightaway. So right in the middle of that, you hit an upshift. And with that torque and with that acceleration that's so exciting, to me it feels like there's all this energy that's bound up in the chassis, in the frame, in the tires, and the swing arm, the shocks, and everything's like this with all that acceleration. And then you hit the shifter, and the gas cuts out, and the spark cuts out for just a millisecond, right? Or I don't know how long it is, but it's a very short period of time. But for me, what I feel is all that energy just gets released, and the bike just turns into this wet rag for like a millisecond. That's what it feels like to me. And then, when the power comes back on, like that, the bike goes like this. The suspension reacts, the chassis reacts, the tires react, and it can be upsetting. It happens at Laguna Seca, and I think I have footage of it, actually, I can show you. Bike is steady, everything's wonderful. As soon as I hit the upshift, boom, the bike starts doing this thing like this, and the whole back straight, like 4 to 5 at Laguna Seca. I'll be rocking like this. I have to like put my body in a certain position and be very gentle, and that's the way I kind of mitigate that problem. Same thing at Thunder Hill. But it's a shorter straightaway, so sometimes I just let it go, right? But it's a thing, and I know it's coming, right? So if my line is going to the edge of the pavement and it's really kind of close, I'll have to back off a little bit because I don't know exactly what's going to happen when I hit that gear. So why am I talking about this chassis stuff and all this energy bound up? Because Shiv did a brilliant thing. Did I just give someone a compliment of open flash person a compliment? I'm evolving as a human being. You see, this is progress. One of the things Shiv did was there's two things that cut out. When you hit the shifter, the fuel delivery stops and the spark shuts off. And that's what makes the motor relax. And then the transmission folds into the next gear, and then boom, and both of them come back on. So he eliminated the cutoff of the fuel. I think I'm going to do a video with Shiv later, and he can explain exactly that kind of stuff. But for now, I think it's better if I do this by myself, so you know that I'm not giving you bullshit. So I think he cut off the fuel. Either way, whatever he did, the result is what you're interested in. And the other thing he did was he made the duration that the spark cuts off for shorter. So now, the difference, now what happens is I'm in the same turn, on the same track, accelerating hard as I can, and waiting, ooh, here it comes, and I hit the upshift. And I'm not saying it was like a sequential transmission of MotoGP bikes, but I no longer felt like this energy, oh wow, bound up, and then poof, it goes like this, and then pow, and it comes back. It wasn't like that. It was more like energy, like pow, there's the next gear. Like, it wasn't that much of a release, so it wasn't that much of a recovery. It was quicker, and it was more smooth. It was smoother. It didn't affect the chassis that much. And you know what? Sensitive ass thing. You might think I'm full of shit. You'll be like, oh, come on. What are you talking about? I can prove it to you. I'll prove it to you right now. The forks. I looked at the shock. The shock doesn't really change that much. But the front fork, when I click the gear, because I know exactly where the shift happens because of data acquisition, right? You can see the front fork, which was probably extended like this because the bike's accelerating hard, falls down 37 millimeters. That the shock falls down like this and then comes back up when the power comes back on. When Shiv's tune is in the bike and I'm running it, same turn, shift point is almost exactly in the same place. You can see one map compared to the other map. The fork does go down when it shifts, but it only goes down 27 millimeters. It goes down 10 millimeters less. And this is lap after lap after lap at the same track, with the same bike, the same guy, weighed the same, unfortunately. So that's two things. That's brilliant. Oh my God. The bike is faster, smoother, and that's time. That saves time. Now I'm in the following laps. I'm coming out of that turn and I'm just hitting it. I'm just hitting it because I know the bikes. I'm not gonna. Sometimes when your bike rocks like this, you know, your trail changes, like, and your bike's doing this, so you'll lose the ability. Like, you'll lose the line that you're on. I know I'm on a line. I'm projecting it, and I'm gonna make it the edge of the track. It's all good. But if I know it's gonna do this, I might lose my line. I might end up in the dirt. So I will back off a little bit. No more backing off. So that's two brilliant changes. Thank you, Shiv. What's the third difference, you ask? I'll tell you. One of the things about the Akra tune that drives me bonkers, it's actually even dangerous sometimes, is when you're full on, like say Laguna Seca. You're full speed, overturn one, down the hill, and then off throttle, bang, 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 3 downshifts, brake, 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 lean the bike in, and maybe you drift in the front. Maybe I'm scrubbing off speed still. I'll brake, and then, like, as I'm letting go of the brake, I'm pushing the bike into the turn and laying on the side, but it's not yet going slow enough to turn. I'm still going to scrub off some speed just with the turn, and maybe the front tire is like a little bit on edge, like maybe it's drifting a tiny bit as I'm going into the turn. Just like the rear tire drifts when you come out of a turn, it's like these black lines. It's kind of a similar thing that happens when you go into a turn. You're kind of like skiing a little bit into the turn. It's a very gentle time where you don't want like any weird shit happening, right? And this is where weird shit happens with the Akra tune, right? So off the gas and you're drifting in like this, And before you start to accelerate, right, the first thing you do is get back into the throttle. Right? I'm not driving yet. I'm not even at the crown of the turn. I'm not even at the slowest part yet where I'll actually really make my turn. But you want to get back into the throttle, right? So you then have control. Like when you're not accelerating yet, the bike's just going to fall when it gets to that point, right? So you have to be in the throttle a little bit. So crack the throttle and it just falls on its face. There's no motor. There is a pause. There's like a blank spot where you don't have a motor. And then all of a sudden, pow, it comes on. And I'm talking just a little bit of throttle. Pow, it comes back on. That is not cool. I have never crashed because of it, but I've gotten into some hairy situations at turn 2 in Laguna Seca, chasing Stefano Mesa, for instance. I was making up time on him on the brakes going in, which is surprising. But these bikes are so good on the brakes. And making up time and going in, like that's where I was. He had power coming out. Even though he was on a Kramer, the better transmission, lighter dude, what does he weigh, like 90 pounds? So all my work was going in. So I'm doing the work and I'm going in and all of a sudden no motor, right? I want to crack on the throttle and nothing happens. So now I'm at this apex, this not apex, right? The crown of my turn. So there's two apexes going in. You clip one, then you make a turn, then you clip another one on the exit, right? So I'm out here in the triangle, the crown, and motor's dead. So the bike falls like this. Then all of a sudden, pow! The bike picks up, and I want to be pointing this way, and I'm pointing this way and accelerating. It's freaky, right? So recoverable and very small. Like if you were in a helicopter looking at my line, you might notice that I went a little bit wide, but you wouldn't be like, wow, what happened to him? But for me, sensitive ass guy, I was freaked out. Oh my God, this is hard to manage. Shiv and his tune fixed that. Now, no matter what turn you go in, that turn at 2 at Laguna, these turns at Thunder Hill, when you're really like accelerating hard and then get into the brakes and trail braking and tipping in maybe over the crown of a little hill that leads into a right hand, like Thunder Hill has this turn 3 where you go over this little rise and then you come down and it's off camber and there's bumps, and that's where you're trail braking going into this turn. It's totally sketch and brilliantly designed, right? That's pretty challenging. That's what's one of the things that's cool about Thunder Hill. You really gotta think, like, I mean, you're on the edge. You really got to be on your toes. So that's not a place where you want to be with the throttle and perfect fueling, like perfect. So those three things are pretty great. Well, like I said, there was one difference in top speed. 149 miles an hour with the pump gas in April, 149 miles an hour with Shiv's tune and like $15 a gallon race fuel. A little bit disappointing, right? But what wasn't disappointing and what did make a difference is, if you look on my data, you can see that my acceleration onto the front straightaway, through the turn, out of the turn, and my gear shifts were earlier. And if you compared my two lines, like there's animations where you can see who's faster than who, always with the tune and the race fuel was faster, accelerating onto straights, out of turns, more fun, more spinning the wheels, really great. I can't say enough. One of the, and the lap times were lower. What did I say before? Give me faster lap times and I'm your best friend. So I do like Shiv now. I'm sorry for hating you before. I was a flawed human being. So as for this top speed thing, why is it? Okay, now Thunder Hill doesn't have a straightaway that's 12 miles long. Right? Obviously, your bike can go faster. Your Superduke can go faster than 149 miles an hour. But at Thunder Hill, that's the fastest I could get to. And Gavin, our buddy Gavin, he's like 150 he hits with his bike. I don't know of anybody who's run a Superduke gets over 150. It's just like terminal velocity. And a little bit of that bike is like trying to push a piece of plywood through a hurricane, right? There's no fairings, all this stuff. But I think that we can get it to go faster. I really do. And Shiv does too. But there's a very interesting point to consider about this knock situation. What the hell is that? That's one of the reasons that Shiv insisted on running this race fuel, right? Because one of the things that he can do, that any Flash Tune guy can do, is not just the mixture of fuel at certain RPMs and you get more oxygen or less oxygen, whatever. Not just that stuff, but you can also play with the timing of the spark and all these special things that maybe you can push the motor a little bit. And the trick is KTM does actually a really good job of like building the motors and getting the tune out of them. I think that they do because, first of all, I've hired 3 people over the years, each of whom had a great reputation, especially according to them, that they were these wonderful engine builders, and each one of them blew up on me like 1 lap, 3 laps, horrible. So is the tune the same way? Like, do they do that good of a job? They get that much out of the bike? I think they do a pretty decent job. But one of the things that's different about the KTM versus like a BMW, for instance, the S1000, is when you really push a bike and you get it super hot, like tuning for the street, what are you going to do? Red line for 3 gears in between traffic lights, or maybe you're going through the mountain roads and you'll be at red line not every turn, right? Because the road's just, it's really hard to do that. But on the racetrack, you're at red line every gear, just about every lap. Sometimes in the summer at 105 degree heat now with temperatures rising. So that's a lot of stress. The motors really can get super hot. And when the motor gets really hot like that and the compression goes up and the gas is volatile, obviously, on purpose. But sometimes the gas, that's the gas and air mixture, when it gets compressed, right, it will detonate. The explosion will happen before the spark plug even fires, just because it's so hot and it's volatile. And gas, if you had a puddle of gas and you threw a match on it, it would just flame, right? But when you put gasoline and oxygen in, and you put it in an environment that's compressed, now you throw a match, it explodes, right? So that's the thing that happens. The motor's so hot in there, when the piston goes up and the fuel and the oxygen and air is in there, it'll just pre-detonate. And that creates like a knocking sound, or pinging. You're driving an old car, ping, 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 when you're accelerating. That's because the fuel mixture is exploding before the piston is even all the way up. So the explosion wants to push it down, but the other piston is finishing its stroke, so it keeps going up, and that really stresses things out. It's bad for the motor. When you hear it knocking and pinging, that is bad for the motor. So one of the things that Shiv and other tuners can do is they play with the timing of the spark and cam timing, whatever the hell it is, so they can get more power at different places. Like maybe a Superduke really needs more power up top. It's got great mid-range, but up the top, it's dead. So in the pursuit to get more top speed, Shiv wants to play with this timing, but he's afraid of knocking because BMW's S1000 has knock sensors, right? And if the motor, the ECU, senses this pre-detonation going on, it will change its own timing and to protect against that happening. You lose a little bit of power, but you don't blow the motor up, right? You don't hurt the motor. The KTM doesn't have that. Not all bikes do, but some bikes do. KTM does not. So Shiv was concerned. And I will give him credit for this because this is something I did not know about, and in education, I will give Shiv credit for not pushing his tune too far in a desperate attempt to get power when maybe he really shouldn't be trying to get power. which other people have done, and my motors have blown up. So credit to Shiv, he didn't blow up the bike, but he does want to do more. He does want to push it more. So, there's always a way, right? He's ordered these knock sensors that I'm machining some parts and designing things to bolt to the motor, and we're going to synchronize that with my data acquisition, and we're going to be able to tell where the motor is knocking, if the motor is knocking, why and for how long and what temperature. We're going to know everything. So Shiv is going to be able to make tunes that are pushing it a little bit, and he's going to know it's safe. Right? He didn't want to push it because he didn't know it was going to be safe. So we're going to make it. We're going to spend money. He already spent the money. I'm not spending shit. But I'll ride the bike and test it, right? We're going to get this to be monitorable and a learning experience. And the tune that I ran will get better. And maybe that 149 miles an hour will change. I believe it will change. So there you go. Gogo's first experience with open flash performance. It was good. I hate to admit it, but it was good.